Hey there, welcome to Factually. I'm Adam Conover. Thanks so much for joining me on the show again. You know, I'm in my early 40s, but a lot of the time I still feel like a young person. And, you know, part of that's because I haven't aged a day in the face or body, as you can all tell. But also it's because compared to the people who run the country, I am actually pretty young. And that's weird. You know, I think people in early middle age should probably be in charge, but no. People of my generation and younger are completely disempowered in our political and therefore economic system. You know, I'm not a fan of generational labels. I'm very on the record about that. But just to indulge in them for a second, there's definitely a shared sense among millennials and Gen Z that the boomers have stayed in charge of this country well past their fucking expiration date. And the world has gotten worse. On their watch, they have presided over an almost total collapse of our economic system, at least for people who are younger than them. But somehow, there are still more members of Congress over 70 than ever before in the history of the country. You know, so here's a little proposal. I don't think that we should be subjected to the grim spectacle of watching politicians like Dianne Feinstein or Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden lose their marbles slowly live on C-SPAN. That's not democracy. It's elder abuse. You know what we should be doing? We should be patting them on the head and giving them their jello while we go and make the world a better place on their behalf. Chuck Schumer should be sitting at home watching Yankee games from the couch with the volume turned up too loud, not leading the goddamn Senate. You know, I'm making jokes, but this is a serious problem. We can't just wait for the change to happen, wait for them to slowly die so we can take over, like living in your parents' house, waiting for them to kick the bucket, because we're going to be fucking 60 when that happens. We need to get them to acknowledge it's not safe for them to drive anymore and that they should move to a home where they can get the support and free jello they need. And I mean that as a metaphor, but only kind of. So how do we push for this generational change? How do we make sure that young people or young-ish people like me can get into power and make the changes we so desperately need in this country? Well, to answer, I have a fantastic guest on the show today who has done a huge amount herself to bring younger people into office. But before we get to that interview, I want to remind you, if you want to support the show, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. $5 a month gets you every episode of the show ad-free. We have a community Discord. We have a community book club. Right now, we're reading Rashid Khalid's The 100 Years' War on Palestine. If you'd like to check out that book, read a little bit of it, and discuss it with some like-minded people, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. If you'd like to come see me do stand-up comedy live on the road, I got a brand new hour about our fucked up political situation and my fucked up personal life. You can see that coming up soon in Brooklyn, New York on November 15th at the Bell House. Great big show, one of my favorite venues in America. Brooklyn, New York, November 15th. Then Washington, D.C. in December and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'm always adding new dates. Head to adamconover.net for all those tickets and tour dates. And let me give you a hug at the meet and greet after every single show. And now let's get to this week's interview. Amanda Litman is the co-founder and president of Run for Something, a PAC that recruits young progressive people to run for office. And she's the author of the new book, When We're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership. Please welcome Amanda Litman. Amanda, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So why have old people held on so long to American politics? What's going on? And why more so now than in the past?
Why would they give it up? It's like it's a joke answer, but it's a real answer because I think it's a genuine question to ask. If you are a 70 or 80-year-old member of Congress, what is the incentive for you to leave? You are getting great health care. You have good benefits. You have a staff that takes care of you. You have a position of power. You're in a job that you have probably held for 20 or 30 or longer years. It's your whole identity, and you have no idea what else to do with yourself. Why would you give it up? I think there's a pretty clear answer to it, but I can understand why they are grasping for dear life with all they can.
Is it not even a hard job? You know, like Dianne Feinstein, right? There wasn't a point where she was like, man, I'm getting tired. I would rather, go to the beach. And my dad retired a couple years ago. He's happier now. you know,
I think it sounds really nice to not work and spend time with your family and your kids or your grandkids and like go hang out on the beach. But I'm also not a member of Congress. So, but I do think it's a real question of like, Why do these folks think that they deserve to hold on to power for so long? And what are the structures that have made it so that there is actually an incentive to stay longer and longer? Because I do think this is something that the Democratic Party in Congress in particular has created, which is a seniority system such that if you want to be a chairman of a committee, it up until about 6 months ago was granted by seniority. So there was a reason to stay for as long as you possibly could. Now that's starting to change, but we're not quite there yet.
Well, and it's gotten worse over time. A couple years back, I read Robert Caro's LBJ biographies. And when he gets to the Senate, the years when LBJ was a senator, he there's a whole passage about the gerontocracy problem, about how you had these doddering old men, who were falling asleep, and how this was like a problem for democracy. And he was writing the book was probably written in the 70s, early 80s, right? But he was writing about LBJ's period in the 60s. So this is like before even Strom Thurmond, that it was a problem back then. To the extent that, this major biographer is like, this was a serious systemic problem in the Senate at the time. But now it's worse. The same problem is actually worse. We've got, I remember Strom Thurmond in around, the early 2000s. Now we've got multiple Strom Thurmonds all the time. And so what forces are causing this already bad problem of having these aging old people get even more malignant?
Well, let's look at the numbers here. The average age in the House is about 58. In the Senate, it's about 63, 64. Even at more local levels of government, these folks are pretty old. Maybe 20% of state legislators are under the age of 40 at most. That's like a generous estimate. The average age of a school board member is 59. The average mayor of a major American city is in their late 50s, although Zoran Mamdani is going to send that plummeting when he takes over in New York, hopefully, in next year. It is boomers or near boomers or often silent generation members as far as the eye can see. And I think part of this is that they have structurally made it really, really hard for young people to run for office, for young people to win, and they have not created space for young people. It's really difficult to run for office against an incumbent. If they're not creating the space, there's not a great incentive structure for you to challenge them.
Yeah, and most of the cases where a big incumbent gets knocked off, like AOC beating that guy Crowley, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when the older politician is just completely derelict in duty, ignores the work of campaigning at all. Recently rewatched that documentary about her
So
campaign.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful documentary. But he handed that to her, right?
Mm-hmm.
By refusing to campaign at all. You could argue that that's giving Zoran the same chance, right? That if there had been a popular incumbent, right, or not a sex abusing couple maniacs, right, corrupt maniacs running, he wouldn't have had quite the same opening. So what makes it so difficult to run against? They've made it difficult for young people to run. How have they done so, and in what way?
I'd say they, in this circumstance, is like the Democratic gatekeepers. So it's party operatives, it's donors, it's activists to a certain extent, the people who control access to things like the voter file. And one of the ways they've done so is by not seeing young people as viable candidates. So if you want to run for office and you go to your party office, your county or state party, and you say, I want to do this, how do I get started? If you don't have the ability to raise large sums of money, especially for a congressional race where the baseline is usually like 300K, they say you need to have, or have like line of sight into, they're not going to take you seriously. They're not going to answer your emails. They're not going to answer your calls. They probably won't even take the meeting to begin with. And there's a bunch of structural things that keep this young people out of these offices or out of these campaigns. For Congress, you likely have to quit your job to run. For city council, state leg, school board, you don't, but it will take up all of your time outside of your full-time job. These positions are barely paid, if they're paid at all, for everything outside of Congress. And even Congress isn't as well paid as it honestly should be, given how much of an expense you have to take on in your personal life. Like you have to maintain 2 homes, you have to travel back and forth. It's much easier to understand why a politician becomes corrupt when they realize how much of their life they have to pay for as a member of Congress.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like not a popular position to go out there and say, oh, we need to pay politicians more. But true, if you don't pay them more, if you don't pay them substantially, and it costs a lot of money to run, then of course they're going to try to personally enrich themselves like you need to pay them so that
Yeah.
they should be paid by the public, not by, anybody else, right?
And like it makes it really hard for anyone who isn't either independently rich or married wealthy or from a wealthy family to run for office. Because if
Right.
you don't have access to wealth, whether yourself or through your network, this structure feels inentrable for you. It's
Mm-hmm.
incomprehensible. I think that is one of the biggest things that like one of the candidates that run for something works would say is, I'm 27 years old. I'm a public school teacher. I want to run for office, but all my friends are also public school teachers or also 27 years old, and they also don't have a ton of money. This party is telling me that I need to ask everyone I know to max out to my campaign. No one I know can afford to do that. That's a really
Yeah.
hard challenge.
Yeah, and in some ways it's part of the natural dynamics of politics, right? Like I've been a part of a couple local campaigns here in Los Angeles where folks I know have run. And one thing that I've noticed is that you kind of need, when you're running, a natural base. You need like a natural network. So, for instance, Hugo Soto Martinez, who I'm lucky to say is a friend of mine who is on the LA City Council now, he came from the labor world, and was a union leader in his union, and had made connections with the rest of labor in Los Angeles. And so who's going to turn out for him? Well, he's got this network of folks who might donate, who might knock doors, who might vote for him, and then he can go from there to everybody else, right? It's like part of just being enmeshed in the political life of the place that you live already is like a natural advantage, as it should be, because politics is part of having what is it to be a democratically elected politician? Is that people in your community like you and know you and feel connected to you, and you can deliver things for them. So like it makes sense, right? Like you can be elected as a leader if you're already a leader in your community to some degree. And there's a lot of people in your area going, oh, I like him, I like her, I know them. Yes, you have my support, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's easier to do when you've been alive longer because you've had more chance.
People.
You know more people, right? Like you're adding to the number of people you know. Your Rolodex only gets bigger as you live, right? Because people, even if you haven't seen someone in 10 years, you can call them up and they go, oh, hey, yeah, I remember when we were in college together or whatever. So that's like age has natural advantages that that's nobody's fault, right? That's just sort of part of the way the world works. But there's also got to be more like specific things that are being done to edge out younger people, right?
There's ways in which gatekeepers can literally undermine young candidates running, prevent them from accessing the voter file, which is the list of voters you need to talk to for your campaign. It's like a database of all of the voters in your district. When you go knock doors, you're working off that list. If you don't have access to it, you're just flying blind. I think one of the biggest things that we have seen them try to do to young candidates, we've actually seen this most recently, even in the last 6 months, is try and find their online histories to undercut them. Because, if you are in your 20s or 30s, at this point, you have probably been online most of your life. For sure, most of your adult life, most of your life. We saw this with a 30-something who's running for United States Senate in Iowa, Zach Walz. Before he announced his campaign, some Democratic operatives across the state were pitching stories to a bunch of different outlets about a post he did on Reddit when he was 19 as part of an AMA, talking about his porn preferences. It was part of a larger sort of promotion for a book that he had coming out about his experience fighting for gay marriage for his two moms in Iowa and speaking in front of the state Senate and like his advocacy in the Boy Scouts, like very wholesome shit. They tried to pitch that as oppo against him. Like, do you really want an elected leader who once talked about porn on the internet? It's like anyone who is in their 20s or 30s at this point has all kinds of wild shit about them online.
Yeah.
That is not a disservice. That means that they're a real person who
Yeah,
hasn't been planning to do this their entire life.
It means they were on Reddit. Like that's all. Like that's what you do on Reddit is stuff comes in front of you, you comment on it. Yeah.
And like, do you know how many politicians in their 50s, 60s, or 70s you'd have to, one, explain what Reddit is, and then two, have much weirder stuff about them out there because they don't think about this public curation of self and presentation. Yeah. It is so missing how people consume information and how important it is to be a real person, not just like a beat bop robot politician.
Yeah. So, but I just want to know, like, what has caused older people to become an even larger proportion? Like, yes, they've wanted to keep everybody else out, but is it also just that like they're living longer than they did in the past? Like, are there demographic factors that are happening? Is it part of the size of the boomer generation? Like, and what sort of policies are we missing out on because older people are in power generally?
I do think part of it is boomers are one of the biggest generations. Millennials are coming up after them. They are living longer and in better health for longer. Modern medicine is a miracle of science. And I think it does have real consequences for policy. And the thing why I think it like really helps articulate the difference here is housing. So if you think about the experience of a current 60 or 70-year-old, probably bought their first house 50 years ago, 40 years ago, at a very different market, probably has not been a renter in a really long time, has moved maybe a couple times. Most of their wealth is caught up in their home. Um, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you experiencing the housing market totally differently. You're almost certainly not a homeowner. Or if you are a homeowner, you're in a starter home where you got locked in low mortgage rates that you now can't move. Or you're a renter who feels incredible instability and like psychic stress because you don't know if your rent's going to keep going up and up. Or you can't afford to live where you want to live or work where you want to work because of the cost of housing. It is a totally different experience. I think a lot about trying to explain to my grandma, who I love. I love Grammy. But trying to explain to Grammy how I used Street Easy to find an apartment and the amount of paperwork I needed to prepare before I even stepped foot into an apartment to tour, and the amount that I'd have to pay for broker's fees and the amount that it would cost for the security deposit. It was unimaginable to her how that process worked. That doesn't mean that she's a bad person or incapable of understanding or like empathizing with that. But multiply that by every politician we have in city councils and state legislatures and in Congress. They don't understand what it means to be a 20 or 30 something in America right now and has direct consequences for how they govern.
Is it just selfishness? Because those people, my grandfather, had an education and home because of the GI Bill because he was a veteran, right? He was part of the generation that the government handed him a home to live in, essentially, as happened for the entire boomer generation, basically, because those policies continued, through the next couple decades. And you would think that those people might say, oh, well, I was handed a home, so people of the next generation might want to be handed a home too. But instead, they seem to say, well, no, why don't you work for it? I worked for it. And, they want to change policies so that that doesn't happen. I mean, I think about, the housing policy here in California where I live. It's all about making sure that people who already are in homes don't have to, their taxes never go up, or that they don't have to pay taxes when they give the home to their kids, or et cetera, et cetera. It's never about making sure that someone in the future gets the same benefit that they received. And I mean, is there any explanation for that other than like myopia and selfishness?
Not really. No. I think that there is people like to joke that millennials are like the me generation, but man, we learned it from the boomers.
Oh my God.
It's
for real.
Not all boomers, no generation is a monolith. Anytime I talk about this stuff on the internet, I get people calling me an ageist or a monster in my mentions. I'm like, sure, maybe, fine. But there is a nugget of truth here, because when I say like, man, they're being such a boomer, you know exactly what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are people who had us. Look, if I had the same experiences that they had, I would probably feel the same way. It's not like they're individually bad people, but it's that they have a set of experiences that gave them a particular perspective. And that plus human foibles and myopia and et cetera caused them to behave in a way that is overall selfish. And we need them to sort of step out of it and look down and like look at what's happening. But the reality is they're not going to, because of all those problems. And so we're sort of stuck politically in this narrow boomer perspective where we're all of American policy is seen through the eyes of a 75-year-old who had all this government policy handed to them, lived through the post-war era, dropped some acid in the 60s and thinks they're cool forever, et cetera, right?
Well, and now they're getting their brains spoiled by the internet. We worry about like the kids online, but no, it's the boomers who we need to be concerned about.
Oh my God. They're
I
the
don't
ones
know.
watching the AI slop. We just did an episode with Jason Keebler from 404 Media about the AI slop taking over Facebook. And it's all boomers who are watching that shit.
I mean, it is unbelievable. I know among my friend group, like we talk about the emails and messages we're getting from our parents that are so clearly written by ChatGPT. And it's like, what are you doing here? Just communicate like a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
Uh,
We're worried about the kids. And we're not worrying about grandma. We got to look on both sides here.
there's the age where, my parents are aging, and I've seen the ways in which they kind of, and I'm sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening, but as people age, they sort of revert to childhood a little bit.
Mhm.
So I've talked about this with my friends too. It's like, oh, my parents used to like cook a nice dinner, and now they do like a microwave frozen thing that they got at Costco. And I'm like, you have money? Why are you getting? You have money and time. Why you have a garden? You know what's good. But as you get older, I think people kind of give up a little bit, and they go, yeah, I'll just have a frozen dinner. Who gives a fuck, And I think it's the same reason. Like, I'll just scroll on Facebook. Why not? And maybe they're treating policy the same way. Like, who cares? I'm on my way out, Why bother?
Well, I do think there's something to millennials and somewhat elder Gen Z being the only ones to really have to learn internet literacy. Like,
Mm.
I remember being in middle school probably and having to really understand, like, what does it mean to use Wikipedia as a source? Like, how did
Mm-hmm.
you look at like the tracing of where the links were going and why was it not credible or not? And like really understanding what a valuable place on the internet could or could not be. And I don't think they definitely didn't teach that to my parents, and I don't think they're teaching that to the kids now. Like we were the singular place who had to learn how to do it in real time.
That's true, because we were like, 18, 19 years old when it was happening.
Mhm.
I was never scared of Wikipedia because I was like editing it because it was just getting started, right? Life's been a little crazy for me lately. I've been bouncing around all over the country, headed from town to town on stand-up tour, and all that travel can make me feel pretty edgy. By the time I get to my hotel room at the end of a long day of flying, I feel too wound up to even know how to relax. But one thing I found to help me unwind? Cornbread Hemp's CBD gummies. Cornbread Hemp CBD gummies are made to help you feel better, whether it's stress, discomfort, or just needing a little relaxation. After a long day, it could be just what you need to help let the stress of everyday life evaporate as you sink into your favorite big cushy chair. Cornbread Hemp only uses the best part of the hemp plant, the flower, for the purest and most potent CBD. And I swear you can taste the quality in it, which really isn't always the case with other gummies. But more importantly, you can taste that these are well-made gummies. Cornbread Hemp gummies have become my go-to, and I'm sure they will become yours as well. And right now, Factually listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/factually and use code factually at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/factually, promo code factually. Watching TV without ExpressVPN is like trying to travel the world without a passport. You're not going to get very far. That's because streaming services like Netflix only show you a tiny fraction of their huge global library of content. Streamers hide content from you based on your location, but ExpressVPN lets you change your online location so you can control where you want those services to think you're located. They have services in 105 countries and all 50 United States, so you can gain access to thousands of new shows and never run out of stuff to watch. This works with so many services: Netflix, Disney+, BBC iPlayer, and more. ExpressVPN is so easy to use. You just fire up the app and click one button to change locations. That's all it takes to access entire libraries of content that have been hidden from you. Best yet, virtually changing your location won't bog down your speeds. You can stream in HD with zero buffering. I was traveling internationally to Europe for my tour a little while back, and I do not know what I would have done without a VPN, because this also works in reverse. You don't want to go on vacation, conk out in your hotel room after a 15-hour flight, go to pop open one of your apps and discover that you can no longer watch your favorite shows because you're in the wrong country. No, with ExpressVPN, you can take your favorite shows with you wherever you go. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/factually. Don't forget to use my link at expressvpn.com/factually to get up to 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. So what are the policies specifically that we're missing out on, or that young people, for instance, might want to put into place if we didn't have this systemic bias towards elderly politicians setting our priorities?
I think housing is a big place that we've already covered a little bit, but thinking more
Mm-hmm.
about housing for first-time buyers and for renters, about increasing supply, about not being so afraid to reduce the value of people's current homes by increasing supply. I think childcare, it is really unimaginable to some of the boomers how much we are paying in childcare expenses right now. It is in many places more than your mortgage or your rent. It is in many places more than the cost of college, and it's only going to go up. I think a lot about transportation costs. How do we think more about public transit and reducing focus on car culture, um, both for the climate and also because I think it's making our mental health really, really bad. And I think, connected to that, health insurance, health coverage, reproductive health care, gender affirming care, mental health care, all of that is experienced very differently by younger folks than it is by the elderly. Not to say one is better than the other, but it's just a very different stage of life.
Yeah, and there's really specific policies that we could put in place. I hate to bring it back to housing, but
Yeah.
you talked about renters. There are so many policies that might benefit renters that we could put into place. Rental protections,
Hmm.
anti-eviction, measures to just stop the cost of rent from rising astronomically. And we have so many of those measures in place for homeowners,
Hmm.
and yet all of our housing policy is just about existing homeowners rather than where young people are living.
Not
um a-
93% of elected officials are homeowners,
wow. And what's
whereas
the US population
it's about
breakdown?
65%-ish.
And let's talk about cities where it's higher. Yeah.
Even in a state like California, where you would think the rental population is much higher, there are, I think, 5 or 6 renters in the state assembly or state legislature. In New York, where I live, there are more landlords in the state legislature than there are tenants.
Wow.
Not great. Not great.
Yeah. Yeah, not great at all. And if you go to, any local city meeting, you'll see a lot more cranky older
Hmm.
homeowners rather than younger renters setting policy or even just, coming up to the mic to talk.
Yeah, one of the things my organization, Run for Something, is doing this year is trying to recruit renters to run for office because it's a
Mm,
thing that we've heard young people say is like, well, I don't own property, so I can't really run for office. What if I have to move? I don't have a stake in the community. And it's like, we don't have freeholder shit here anymore. There is nowhere that it says you have to own property to be an elected official.
mhm.
Nowhere in any of these rules is that the case. If you're a renter, especially in this particular economy, in this housing market, you have as much a right to have a say in the future of it. And in fact, maybe even more so because your voice is for sure not being part of that conversation.
Yeah, one of my real beefs in local politics is you'll go to these meetings and you'll have people come up, and it's always someone trying to like get a homeless encampment thrown in the
Hmm.
landfill or whatever, and they'll say, "I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years." And what I always want to say is, who gives a fuck?
I don't
I
care.
I could have lived here for 6 months. I live here now, motherfucker, and like I have a stake here because I pay rent here currently. So you're
Hmm.
not better than me because you've lived here longer. In fact, like you built the system, arguably, that we all live under, that we all agree sucks. So
Hmm.
maybe you should shut the fuck up. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit
No, I
mad.
am right there with you. It makes me furious. And it is so like aggressively tied with the same people who are like, immigrants welcome, communities of color welcome, refugees welcome, but not new people who might want to live here,
Right.
not next to me. No way, no how.
I mean, look, I'm always plugging my stand-up tour on this. I currently have a 15-minute long bit of people with the love is love, kindness is
Ugh.
everything sign who live in a giant gated community, I literally took a photo like last year of a everyone is welcome here sign in front of the biggest gated mansion you've ever seen on
Hmm.
some windy hill street I was on a jog in Silver Lake. It's this I hate to use the word virtue signaling because I think virtue signaling is often a good thing.
Yeah.
But the amount of cognitive dissonance that you have to not understand, everyone is welcome here, except I don't actually want anyone to live here.
Not in
Right.
that apartment building next to my nice house. No way, no how.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, those are the problems with older people running the world, and we've got some of the barriers. How do we begin to overcome them?
We ask young people to run and then we help them win,
How do we
which
do that?
so I run this organization called Run for Something. We launched back in 2017, and we have built a pipeline of 230,000 young people across the country who said they want to run. We've endorsed more than 3,000. We've helped elect more than 1,500. They are amazing millennial and Gen Z leaders in state and local office all across the country who are actually doing the damn thing. Hugo Soto Martinez is one of our alum. Nithya
Is he
Raman.
really?
Yes, he was one of one of my favorites to endorse in that cycle, as well as Nithya
Mm.
Raman, who's on the city council, who's been
My
like a
my city councilor?
she's so good. And then,
Yeah.
there's Lindsay Horvath, who's on the board of supervisors.
Yeah.
I think we're one of the first renters or only renters on that board of supervisors.
Mm.
There's been so many of these amazing leaders who have shown up and decided that they're not going to wait for the system to fix itself or wait for someone to say it's their turn, but rather to claim their power in a really meaningful way. It's
And
awesome.
so you support them how?
So we do everything from asking people to run for office. So, tell them to sign up with us, learn how to find what office they can run for, figure out how to write a campaign plan, design a budget, design a campaign message, all the way through to endorsing them, helping them connect to other partners, get discounts on tools, leverage our national relationships on their behalf, help them raise money, help them get volunteers, and then stick with them post-election day. So if they want to run for office again, how do they set themselves up for that? And if they don't, what do they do to be good governance?
So I want to put on my skeptical hat for 1 second
Hit me.
and push at this a little bit. Because we've talked about, okay, why we want more young people in office, but I think the last couple of years have shown us that someone's age or generation does not necessarily correlate with their political convictions. We had a lot of right wing youngsters, right? A lot of right wing Gen Z folks who maybe we would charitably say, oh, they don't understand why they're voting for something that's actually going to hurt their generation. They're voting for a billionaire who's close to 80 years old. Well, we can set that political problem aside for now. But A, those things aren't directly correlated, and then B, I think sometimes the left of center political groups, such as yours, tend to put process ahead of actual policy, right? Or actual results. They're like, hey, we just want to make sure we get some good people in there, and we got to beat the fascists and the right wingers, and let's make sure we market our candidates right, but without enough focus on what do the people actually stand for, and making sure that they're actually running on policy that people actually give a shit about and will change the world in ways that we actually care about and are not just sort of feel good sloganeering, right?
Totally.
And so how much do you bring ideology and policy into your who you choose to work with?
So we have a set of values we want every candidate we work with to align by. It's pro-choice, pro-equality, pro-tolerance, pro-working families, pro-affordable healthcare. There's a few others in there. You can go find them all on our public endorsement application, which is on our website. But the thing with Run for Something is we work in all 50 states. So we've got candidates who are on the Anchorage School Board in Alaska, the Iowa State Senate, the Miami-Dade School Board, the New York State Legislature, Texas County executives, all across the country. So to be able to work with candidates and win, which we have done in all of these places, we need to be strict on our values, but flexible in how they show up as policies. So, for example, one of our values is you have to be committed to reducing gun safety, you have to be committed to reducing gun violence and promoting gun safety. We're pro-gun safety, anti-gun violence.
There are a lot of people running to reduce gun safety.
I
that
know,
is
so I want to be
a
super
political
clear here.
position in America. Yeah.
We're pro the safety part against the violence part.
Great.
If you are running, say, for Alabama State Legislature, which we have an incredible member of the Alabama State Legislature, the policies that you can work with there are very different than if you're, say, running for, city council in Phoenix or state leg in Iowa. That doesn't mean one is necessarily right or wrong, but we got to be a little bit flexible in what we're demanding of the Alabama state legislative candidate, because he just doesn't have as much wiggle room to work with given the political environment. So when we worked with Philip Ensler, who's a member of the Alabama State Leg, who was able to get a gun safety legislation passed in Alabama, is it everything that every gun safety activist would have wanted? No, but is that progress in Alabama? Yes. And for now, that's a big step forward.
Mm. Now, the rubber meets the road, though, and where exactly you make that cut,
Mhm.
and because there are plenty of times I think a lot of folks on the left can think of many times in which they're asked to compromise a little bit strategically, and what they end up compromising is a value or
Totally.
is. I mean, let's be real clear about, you see Democratic politicians equivocating on trans rights right now,
Hmm.
right? And there are trans folks in America who are like, we are being thrown under the bus. This is not, you cannot equivocate about our humanity, right? So how do you make sure that you're not compromising your values when you do that? Because it's a very difficult, it's easy to say,
Hmm.
but it's much more difficult to do.
It is. It's very hard to do it. We haven't always gotten it right, but we're working at scale. We're working with thousands of candidates. And the fact that we've won a bunch of places and made some really meaningful progress, I'm proud of that. And I think we have to really hope that candidates are being honest with us about what they believe and how they will govern. We have declined to re-endorse people if they don't always hold true to those values. And really like pushing folks to tell us like how is what you're talking about in touch with where your community is? Like, how do you know that's where your voters are? Because I'm actually not the best person to decide what the Blue Springs, Missouri City Council candidate should take a position on. But I hope that that candidate who's connected to community enough, like as we were talking about earlier, has a base of support, can explain to me like how is this where their voters are?
Right, because the way democracy is supposed to work is
Hmm.
that we the voters tell the politicians what they want, or the voters select a politician who represents what
Yeah,
they want, and the
ideally.
politician operates at the whim of the voters, right?
Hmm.
And so if you go back to that principle again and again, hopefully you make good choices.
Our MO is that run for something's endorsements are, yeah, like meant to help signal to voters this is a good candidate, but it's not like a Planned Parenthood endorsement or a Sierra Club or LCV where it signifies a particular position on any given issue. Um, we are trying to empower candidates to be the best possible messengers to their communities. We don't know how to talk to voters. Candidates know how to talk to their voters. We don't run ads on their behalf. They run ads. They are the messengers. They're the best people to really connect with their voters. I think it can be really hard for political operatives to think like this because it requires us to trust voters, which feels really silly
Hmm.
to say in this moment, but I think that's what they want. They want to know that we trust them.
Well, that's really interesting as a form of strategy for you, because it sort of cuts both ways. Because on the one hand, I could read that as you not really having that strong of a set of values. You're saying, well, no, ultimately we're going to let the voters decide. And then I go, well, what if the voters in Alabama, like, what if they really support stuff I don't like? And so therefore I might sit here in California and go, I don't know if I like what your org is doing in Alabama, because you're empowering people and policies that I might disagree with. On the other hand, there's a lot of political organizations that push a specific agenda top down, which is another problem in our political system, and that they're trying to sort of impose it on people. And you are trying to go back to an older, sort of more organic form of democracy where you're focusing on, no, 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 we want candidates who are connected with their voters, and we're trying to increase that connection. And so a different analysis might say, no, our problem is we have political leaders in office who are only taking orders from pressure groups, right? And they're not connected enough to their voters. And what we want is the connection between the politician and the voter, and that's the most ideal thing for democracy, even if we don't like every single specific result every single time. Am I
I
am,
think
am I
that's right.
saying it
And
well?
I do think so. And I think like this is the tension, but if we want to win in deep red places or purple places, which Democrats need to do long term, there's a incredible redistricting that will be happening in 2030, where the electoral college is going to get upended for 2032, assuming we still get an electoral college or a presidential election in 2032,
Yeah.
where it won't be enough to win, the blue wall if it even exists. We're going to need to win red states in order to get enough electoral college votes to win because of the population loss, because of housing affordability, primarily in places like New York, Illinois, and California. So, yeah, I don't need to agree with every Democrat elected for school board in a southern state or a red state or Idaho. I'm not their constituent. It actually doesn't matter if I agree with them. What matters is that the voters in that community agree with them. I think this is one of the challenges, the broader sort of activist space in particular, where you can absolutely fight for a community without speaking for that community. And there's a distinction here. And that is, I think, where politicians have gotten a little messed up.
And I want to make a broader point to those of a leftish persuasion who are listening, because I think so often we condescend to people in red areas. And look, there's many people in red areas. There's many people in blue areas as well who have bigoted views or views that we might not want to have be represented in elected office. But there's also many, many, many people whose views would align with a leftist perspective. Or let me put this a different way. I think part of the core of, for instance, when I think about unionism, right, which is the portion of the left that I'm most closely associated with, the point is the workers know something. The workers know what they need. The point is to give them power. And if you listen to them and you accurately reflect what they actually need, you are doing good organizing. You are furthering the agenda, right? You have to trust them. Like the core, one of our core values in my union work is trust the membership. Don't think, oh, we can't actually let them say what they think. And so I think part of what we need to remember is that even deep red places are full of really good, empathetic people who would support the kind of policies who we agree with, that would support their lives. They're just being held down by a really fucked up political system and a lot of, pressure groups that don't represent them.
Well, and not only that, but something like 70% of local races go uncontested to begin with, which means in many of these races, Democrats say in a 70-30, red to blue district, those 30% of Democrats never have someone to vote for. They have never met a Democrat running for office. They've never had someone come knock at their door. They've never even been given a chance. Like, we have seen this even in the last 7 months or so in almost all of the state Senate races that in districts where Trump won in 2024, where Democrats have now flipped the seats and outperformed Trump by upwards of 20 points. Each of those districts have been uncontested at least once in the last decade.
Yeah.
If we're not running, we can't win. And often people think, well, if I'm not like the perfect candidate, I shouldn't get on the ballot. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of good in this particular moment, where we need to try and get any hold onto power we can in some of these places. And then we can move the needle further.
And by making the campaign, you can make the case and you can activate the people. I think about, this whole conversation, we should be talking about Zoran's candidacy more. But the way, watching him so visibly go to literally the people of New York City one-on-one and say, what do you want? Have them tell him on camera. And then he says, that's what I'm going to go fight for. And thereby activated, hundreds of thousands of people who are completely tuned out of the political system or voted for Trump. New York City swung harder for Trump than any other major city in America. It didn't go for Trump, but like the swing to the right was, the biggest change of any city, I believe, especially in working class neighborhoods like the Bronx. And by going to those people and saying, no, actually, what is really fucking affecting you? And okay, here's my plan to do something about that. Based on your feedback, he was able to swing those people back. And like, imagine if someone did that in Appalachia, right? And actually ran with that technique and went to the people and said, hey, forget about the fucking NRA and the pro-life people who are speaking for you. What do you want? And did that, and maybe you don't win the first time, but you do that for a decade or so. Like, then you've actually created a constituency that is fighting not just for like, oh, the Democratic Party, but for like what they want and what they need, which last time I checked was kind of supposed to be the point of the left generally, was like fighting on behalf of working people and giving them their actual needs.
I'm
getting
That's
it
exactly
right?
right. You've just described the run for something long-term strategy. Congratulations.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll get along. Okay, cool. I wanted to know. Okay, so let me ask you this about political office. People occasionally will ask me to run for office because I've gotten involved politically. Okay, you're giving me a look.
You
Give
should
me a
run for
look.
office. You
You're
should
giving-
run for office.
God damn it.
You should think. You should think about it. If you, we can talk off. We can talk offline. But if you are thinking about it,
No, it's more fun to talk about it here. Look, I've gotten very involved in labor work, right? I've been involved in city politics. I've been in and out. Sometimes I'm more wrapped up in my own personal shit, but it's stuff that I care about. People sometimes say you should run for office. A way that I have felt often, though, is that if I'm like, damn, I could do a hell of a campaign. I would have a great time. It'd be real fun to campaign, right? Once you get into office, though, you become the recipient of so much pressure, right? So, like we have a pretty mature political system. There's a lot of organizations, individuals, political actors whose entire job is to press on elected officials as hard as possible. And then the official gets like shunted in a particular like, oh shit, I came in wanting to do this, but now I'm being forced to do this or forced to do that or it's like it is a lot to deal with, right? And also, by the way, a big problem we have on the left is as soon as you get elected, the same people who voted for you suddenly hate you because now you're in a position of power, and there's some in our coalition who just enjoy being disempowered and yelling at people who are used to be on their side. Now that they're in power, they hate them and they blame them for everything, right? So that's uncomfortable. And my answer to that to people has occasionally been, maybe instead of being the recipient of power, it's better to be the power. And that's how I think of my labor work, right? Like in the labor movement, we can put together a coalition of working people that can press on the politicians, right? We can be the ones who show up and say, no, you better do what we fucking want you to do. And they go, oh my God, the hospitality workers are here. I better pass that minimum wage increase, And now some of that is a cop-out, right? It means like, well, maybe I don't want to do the hard work and run. But I do have that concern of like, okay, running could be fun. It could be engaging. It has the illusion of power. But once you get in these roles, you might not have as much power as you think you do. I'm curious what you think about that.
No, I think there's a certain reality of you run for office with big ambitions, and then you win. You have to govern in reality. You campaign in poetry, govern in prose. But prose is a type of art as well. There can be beautiful, meaningful, moving prose. I have found that the best candidates and the best electeds are the ones who have the communication skills to bring people with them and explain why it's hard. So there's a city council member here in New York City where I live, is a Run for Something alum named Chi Oze. He was the first Gen Z member of the city council. He is so fun on social media.
I've seen him. Does he do stuff about transit?
Does stuff about all kinds of things. He's got a whole series. Transit is a big one. Housing is a big one.
I've seen it just on my TikTok feed. I've seen his shit.
He has a big series about like why shit doesn't work.
I've seen this. Work. Yes.
Yep. And his ability to explain why the system is broken can help bring people with him as he tries to fix it. I think this is something that, here in New York, where Mamdani, I think, is very likely to win in November and become mayor. He has the communication skills and the platform to explain to his movement and to the people of New York City the challenges and tensions and compromises that he is going to have to make as he tries to get things done. And if you can bring people along with you, if you can be transparent and honest and authentic as you do that, I think people will trust you. That is like the sort of, getting back to our generational divide earlier, like it's a very quintessentially millennial thing to like show your work as you do it, to bring people along with you, to build in public, such as it is. I think the politicians who can do that well are going to be able to navigate that structural challenge.
That's such a good value, and it's something that I've always tried to do in my work. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do sometimes.
Hard
to bring people along to explain what's happening, especially when, as a politician, I've seen it happen to people that I know. You will specifically be cast in a negative light by people in your own community who are seeking to tear you down. And I think that's a big barrier to people running too, is, hey, if I win, or even before I win, as I'm running, there are going to be people who are just out to make me look bad, to villainize me, right? That's if nothing else, emotionally difficult, even if you can handle the hit to your reputation, I know I know elected officials in LA who've been fearful for their kids at times,
Totally.
and that's, our political culture is getting worse. We got more political violence than ever. That's another hard issue, right?
It's so difficult. It's something we work with candidates on, like real physical safety, online safety, how to keep your home address off the internet, which in some places you actually have to do as part of your campaign filing paperwork, although the rules are changing around that as we've
Wow.
seen the violence in Minnesota and elsewhere. It is really, really scary. And it's gotten worse in the last 5 years. But I think people are running anyway. And like they see how scary it is and they get on the ballot anyway. I find that very moving. Very, very
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, no, it is, and I'm not trying to give people reasons not to do it. I'm just talking about, for my own part, as I have thought about it.
Yeah.
Because it's, so I think I'm drifting off to sleep, and I'm like, oh, what if once you actually start to conceptualize what it would take, there's a lot of things about it that aren't rosy. You know what I mean?
No, and I think it's really important to be clear-eyed about what it is. Like,
Yeah.
it is hard. There's when I talk to people running for office, one of the first questions I ask is like, do you want to do the job? Do you want to, if someone running for Congress, like, do you want to be a member of Congress? Do you want to be a city council member? And if their answer is, well, no, but, then don't run. Don't do it if you don't actually want to do the job you get to do or have to do if you win. Because running is so, so hard. There's not enough money, not enough glamour, not enough power. You're going to have to make compromises. You're going to get yelled at. Unfortunately, your life could be like at jeopardy or at risk, your physical safety. It is taxing on your spirit. And one thing I will say, basically every candidate we have ever worked with who has ran and either won or lost will tell you it was worth it. Which I think is so, speaks to what it does to your relationship to your community and to your home. I did an interview once with Sarah McBride, the now member of Congress from Delaware, first openly trans member there, who was a state senator in Delaware before that. She's a Run for Something alum, one of my favorites, such a principled leader. She's taken a lot of heat lately, but she really knows who she is and what she believes and what her role is in this moment.
Yeah.
And she told me, if you want to fall in love with where you live, run for office. Because the way that it puts you sort of in relationship with your neighbors, with your community, it is transformative to how you understand the place you call home. It's magical.
That's really, really magical. And that's one of the things that appeals to me the most about politics. I've seen friends of mine go through that transformation. I feel the same way about my union work, the way it connects me to, the industry that I'm in and the community of artists that I'm a part of. I also, I've seen some people in the queer community say some very nasty things about Sarah McBride. And I'm not even going to argue with those people because people can differ on political strategy and whatnot. But how painful it must be for her, I would imagine, to see people call her a sellout or whatever, because she is taking a particular political strategy that she feels is best, right? She's making her choice of the political strategy she's going to take under extraordinarily difficult conditions,
extraordinarily,
and she's extremely poised and et cetera. And again, reasonable people can differ, but I can also imagine, the pain that must cause.
Well, this is the challenge with really any leadership position, but especially in politics. It is, especially in this moment, so lonely. It's so isolating.
Yeah.
Even if you have, say, a politician, which this doesn't happen anymore, but a politician has 70% approval rating. That'd be exceptionally popular. That still means 30% of people don't like them. And those 30% are probably really, really mean in their Instagram comments.
Yes. This is what I'm talking about. And I'm a person who I that would be rough for me because I'm already in the public eye all the time. And a lot of people really love what I do. And I get a lot of those thumbs up. It's really hard not to focus on the thumbs down and to focus on the nasty thing. And there's that little dark voice inside of you that goes and looks for the nastiest comment.
100%.
Because that's the one that sort of matches your little self-loathing voice inside. Your self-loathing voice says, you're a piece of shit. And then when you go find that comment that says you're a piece of shit, then you're like, yeah, see, it was right. The dark voice inside was right. And it's this sort of psychic self-harm that you can do. I'm going a little bit far afield here, but that's hard for me as a fucking comic with a podcast, and the difficulty it must cause for someone who's actually doing something.
So I wrote a book earlier this year about millennial and Gen Z leadership called When We're in Charge. And a big part of it is about the challenge that especially millennials and Gen Z rising to power, both politically and at work and anywhere else, have is that we are being asked to be authentic, to be yourself, and to do that in all different kinds of places, to do it online, at the office, over Zoom, in Slack, and then to deal with the incoming feedback that you get. The people who saying the worst possible shit about you, your employees doing negative reviews on you on Glassdoor, your voters sliding into your DMs and being hateful or mean. And like, how are you supposed to be yourself in that moment, knowing that if you are, like, it is going to get you like pilloried? I mean, I think about this myself as I run a political organization. It is very good. I've also made some mistakes as a leader. I write about that a ton in the book. My therapist told me I get yelled at online more than any of his other clients. I was like, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, my dude. It's real though. It's real. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, and I don't want to prioritize like the feelings of people who are in public as being the most important thing. What I'm trying to say is this is one of the barriers that makes it hard for people to do it, right? Like, because a lot of, I think people know before they step over that threshold what they're going to be in for. And so everybody else gets to say, I'm going to prioritize my peace. You know, I'm going to do my good work in the world. And then apart from that, you know what? I'm not going to deal with this shit, right? And I do that in a lot of areas of my life. It's hard to step into an office where you don't get to say that anymore. No. You know, you and I can sort of say it right now because you're an author and an activist and I'm a comedian. I can say, man, it sure is hard when people yell at you. I don't think, you know,
don't feel bad for me. Yeah. Like
anybody in elected office doesn't really get to say, hey, wow, my feelings are hurt all the time. But it's real and it's a part of our political culture that's new because of the internet and everything else. And it's difficult. I don't have an answer for it.
I don't either, but it's something, you know, as part of the book, I talk to all of these, millennial Gen Z members of Congress, as well as like executives and editors in chief and doctors and lawyers and all that. And it was a thing I heard from all of them. Different variations, different themes, but it is the isolation, the loneliness, the mental health challenges of these roles of any kind of leadership position right now. It is crushing. And, you know, that's what the money is for. That's what the title is for. It's what the corner office is for in many ways. But that doesn't mean you can't have some kind of empathy for the person, even if you don't have empathy for the role.
And the hard thing especially is if you really want to do good shit, because that's the important thing. Right? The important thing is not your feelings. No. The important thing is making the world materially better for actual people, protecting vulnerable people, and all those sorts of things. That's why I'd never say Sarah McBride's feelings are more important than, you know, the reality of the people who she represents, to take an example. But I think that is why so many politicians just do shit to be liked. They do shit so they get yelled at the least. And that's a problem. You know, like, for instance, we talked about homeowners. The homeowners are the meanest people in local politics. They're so nasty. And they have, and, you know, 65-year-olds who own their home and have their home fully paid off and are no longer working. They have nothing to do but sit around and be mean on the internet, also in person. And so they end up driving the whole agenda, you know? And I think actually the people who, the politicians who probably have the least emotional turmoil are the ones who embrace the meanness and just go on the attack. Like, that's what the right-wingers do, right? They just say, yeah, fuck everybody I don't like. Right?
Well, and you think about the kind of personality you have to willingly enter this. I mean, the Run for Something candidates we work with over the years who are far and away some of the most selfless, community-centered, values-driven leaders I've met. You know, they are in many cases the exception, not the rule. Like, you do kind of have to be a sociopath to throw yourself into the lion's den like this.
Yeah.
That sucks. We should change our political system such that is not the case. And that should actually be a goal of when we think about structural reform. Like, what can we do to make it so that when you run for office, you are not signing up to just experience the worst of humanity every day?
But the problem is that, okay, and I hate to keep talking about these barriers or the problems with running, but say I run for office and I join the political system. Well, I can try to make the political system itself better. For instance, maybe I can try to get some law passed about campaign finance or XYZ, right? Or the debate system or blah, blah, blah. But I don't get to change the media environment. I don't get to change the the newspapers or the television news. Like I don't get to make Fox News not exist. And that is driving so much of the conversation. For instance, here in Los Angeles, where do people engage with politics? There basically is no local paper anymore. The LA Times only sort of covers, local politics. There's a couple blogs that do. There's the local radio stations. Those aren't reaching that many people. Most people are going on Facebook and Nextdoor, right? And that's where, and they're seeing just abject racism and rumor and stuff like that. And, I've had conversations with people in politics and they're like, how do we change the narrative and like reach those people? Like, who do we go to? And I was like, I don't know if you fucking do, man, because there is simply not there isn't like a TV show you can go on. There isn't a newspaper columnist you can talk to on the phone that people read anymore. We're just, you're at the whim of these social media sites and these giant like media organizations. You don't get power over those things when you win office. You still are their victim.
You don't, but I do think you can do things that can help break through. I think Mamdani has been like the first really good example of this.
Absolutely.
Where, earlier this summer, he hosted a scavenger hunt in New York City that had thousands of people bopping around the city, like doing my favorite thing, which is just like going from place to place on the subway, getting ice cream, solving clues. And the prize was like, honestly, the friends you made along the way. It got people in person together in community, and good candidates and really smart campaigns can cultivate that. Now, I think to your broader point of like, you can't fix everything, I think that's often an excuse people use to not do anything. Changing campaign finance reform would be huge. Even if it wouldn't solve every other problem, it alone would be huge. And we should make stuff like that a goal and try and do it, knowing that there are so many other problems to fix that we can't solve all of them doesn't mean we should try and solve none of them.
No, and you're hitting my philosophy, which is, we can always do something today to make it better tomorrow, no matter how bad the situation is today. And it's in fact incumbent upon us to do so. So that's really real. I mean, look, Mamdani's had a wonderful campaign. He's also benefited from the Instagram algorithm, right?
Totally.
And, one phone call from Trump to Mark Zuckerberg, and Mamdani 2.0 doesn't get off the ground. Now, he's also doing person-to-person organizing on a massive scale, which is like, that's the real shit, knocking on doors and like meeting people where they are. That is the real shit. But he's also been the beneficiary of like, of catching the algo, which like I know as well as anybody is a fickle thing. But your point is really well taken. So what if say I do want to run for office? Let's just don't lean in like that. you're okay.
We'll talk about it.
I'm getting scared. We're having a conversation. All right. So let's say let's say you've tickled my fancy, right? I'm like, all right, okay. What's steps 2, 3, and 4 after my curiosity is piqued? What do I do next?
We'd have a little conversation here about what is the problem you care about solving? What would the office that would give you power to solve it? And then I'd really push you to say, why should voters want you to win? Which is different than why you want to win. You want to win because winning is great and losing sucks. Voters are going to want you to win because you're going to do something for them. Like, what is that thing you're going to deliver? Once you've been able to answer those 3 questions, like the problem, the office, and why voters want you to win, that's the core message of your campaign. Everything else is logistics. We can work through logistics. We can work through how you'd raise the money, how you'd get on the ballot, like the political environment. It is not rocket science. It's hard work and it would take time and effort and energy and the commitment of you and your friends and your family. But like idiots do this all the time, unfortunately. You can do this. We would help you. What we cannot teach you is, and what we cannot, create for you is that intrinsic motivation to do it. So if you've got that, we can solve for everything else.
A lot of people, the intrinsic motivation is the wrong motivation, right? Is the self-aggrandizing motivation or the lust for power or notoriety or wealth or that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and those are not the ones I like to work with personally. But I do think a lot of those you can tell they flame out pretty fast, generally speaking. Not always, especially not historically, but in the last couple of years, it's very hard for you to run for office successfully if you are constantly debating within your campaign what you believe. Like the
Mm.
best campaigns are the ones where it's a decision of how to communicate what you believe, what tactics to use, but the core values are there. That's the key.
I want to come back to the question of young people and core values, because I'm looking at, J.D. Vance is the most powerful millennial.
Ugh. Most punchable person in America. I know.
Yeah, no, and he somehow I think his punchability is almost his greatest asset. I think it almost comes across as authentic to people in America, because I feel like everybody in small town America knows some jumped up little shit who's the son of a car dealer and drives a sparkling clean Ford F-150 and has fake cowboy boots on and like talks like a good old boy, like a fake good old boy, but they're like, I know that guy, he's our prick. I feel like that's how JD Vance comes off to a lot of people. But yeah, he's a real like he's a real special case, this guy. And so I'm just a little bit worried. Do you have any concern about, again, your techniques being used to sort of create dark twins of the people you're trying to get elected, right? Where like again, he's the most successful person of his age so far in our, of my age cohort in American politics. And he started out saying stuff that like wasn't quite so repulsive. He started out talking about his community, right?
Totally.
And now he's out there doing what he's doing. So how do you account for that?
I think JD Vance is a really good example of someone who, one, deeply sucks, but two, like whenever he takes over the Republican Party, he is not going to be able to hold it together. He does not have the juice. Trump's brand that he had built over 40 years in the public eye, as repulsive as it is to me, like it attracts a very particular coalition. Not to compare him to Obama. He is not the same as Obama, but in the same way that Obama was able to build a very specific Democratic coalition in 2008 and 2012 that then fell apart as when Obama was no longer at the center of that conversation, Trump's coalition is similarly as tenuous. And when JD Vance tries to take it over, one, he's not going to walk into that without a fight. Those like the Trump sons, Kristi Noem, Marco Rubio, all the little dingleberries around the Republican Party are going to fight him for it. And two, he's not going to be able to hold it because, to your point, he does not have core values. He does not have like a clear sense of self. They're going to try and push him to have conversations and like, have the 3-hour-long podcast conversations. He's going to meander. He's going to lose his core shape because it's like snakes all the way down. And when they try and unpeel that, it's not going to work. So I think when pressure comes to him, he's going to crumble.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. Because he very transparently has no core. And again, I think that is, in some way, there's some people who like that about him.
Not enough, though.
Yeah, no, not enough. Not enough. It's just he's very blatant about it. I guess my question is, look, something that I really deeply believe is that every problem on Earth was caused by people being people. People have good and evil, competence and incompetence, altruism and greed within them, sort of all in equal measure. Those things are evenly distributed throughout the human population. So every human created group has those things within it. I talk about this a lot in the labor movement. I'm like, hey, every union's going to have some selfish people, going to have some assholes, going to have some, there's going to be problems in every group, right? And we can't just assume that things are going to be great. It's really easy when you get involved in a union to look around and go, oh, everyone thinks like me and we're all good people and the bad people are just the bosses. No, if you were a boss, you'd be bad too. The problem is the systems. You're trying to build a system that sort of overcomes some of that stuff. And that doesn't, doesn't support the bad things and supports the good things about humanity. And so I'm curious how you see your work, right? If you're just saying, hey, we need to get young people to run, we want to put them in positions of power. Well, they're going to have bad and good in them just like any other generation. So how do you see your work as creating systems that is going to support only good things and sort of keep the bad shit like JD Vance type young people out?
Part of this is our endorsement criteria does have a strong values system that we work for. So, like, we don't work with Republicans. We don't work with people who are anti-gay, anti-choice. Like, practically, we don't do that. And I think that what we have found is that many of our candidates are able to change these structures as they enter them. Like, they can pass campaign finance reform. They can make city councils more accommodating to parents. They can, we just had a city council member in Houston. This sounds like a really small thing, but it's actually a big deal. So many of the city council meetings that they were having in Houston were in the afternoon, which meant that the only people who could come were retirees, folks who didn't have work or like could take time off work to go there. They moved them to the evening and they had 90 people show up to come speak on an issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a small thing that really changes accessibility and civic engagement. Yes. Is it, does it change the world? No. Does it change that community, which if you do it 10,000 times over in every county in America could change the country? I think so. I think one of the things that the Democratic Party and the left has really lost sight of is that we tend to focus on the big flashy thing at the top of the ballot. We talk about the presidency, we talk about Congress, and yes, those are really important. The things that actually affect your quality of life are who runs your school boards, who runs your city councils, who runs your mayors, who runs your state legislatures. These small offices can have such a big impact and can lay the groundwork for us to more easily be able to win the big offices. If we win more of the small ones, we can win the big ones. That is what the work we do is trying to accomplish. It's trying to build not just short-term wins, but long-term power.
And power for not just young people, but working people, average people.
Mm-hmm. For normal people, which I just got like totally normal people. The thing that I love about the thousands of candidates Run for Something has worked with is that they are, and I mean this in the most like complimentary way, totally ordinary. They're totally ordinary. They people who worked at Chipotle. They're teachers. They're nurses. They're actors and actresses. They are rodeo stars. They are small business owners. They are parents who have decided that because they care enough about their community, they're going to put their name on the ballot. Being a politician or an elected official, it's kind of like being a comedian or an artist or a musician. You're not born to do it. The way you become one is by doing the damn thing. You become a podcaster by making a podcast. You become a politician by putting your name on the ballot.
Yeah.
And these are folks who said, you know what? I'm not going to wait for someone to tell me it's my turn. I'm not going to wait for someone to tap me on the shoulder. I'm getting in. I think that's so powerful.
All right. Today I'm announcing my candidacy for California governor 2028.
Let's go. Someone's got to do it.
Lieutenant. We'll start with Lieutenant. Amanda, if people want to jump in, if this is inspiring to them, like where do they find you? What's their step one to get in touch with you?
Go to runforsomething.net. You can look up where you can run. You can find more information. I am just yapping all over the internet at Amanda Litman or Amanda Litm.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. You're such a wonderful communicator, and you make me feel very positively about the potential for change in our political system, which is something I could use right about now. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again to Amanda for coming on the show. I hope you loved that conversation as much as I did. If you want to support the show, well, first of all, you can head to factuallypod.com/books to pick up a copy of Amanda's book that'll support not just this show, but your local bookstore as well. If you'd like to support the show directly and get all of our community features, ad-free episodes of this podcast, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. $5 a month gets you in. For $15 a month, I'll read your name in the goddamn credits because you're such a big supporter of the show. This week, I want to thank Nick Wagner, Greg0692, VG, Matthew, Robert Miller, Oh No Not Again, BK, Robin Ward, 90 Miles from Needles, Game Grumps, the famous Game Grumps, like the guys who play the game. That's amazing. Thank you, Game Grumps, for your support. Love you guys as well. Ruben Solvang Valen and A Screaming Batman. Thank you, A Screaming Batman, for your support. If you'd like me to read your name or silly username on the show, or hey, even the name of your YouTube channel, patreon.com/Adam Conover, once again, is that URL. If you want to come see me do stand-up comedy live on the road, head to adamconover.net for all those tickets and tour dates. Of course, I want to thank my producers, Tony Wilson and Sam Roudman. Everybody here at HeadGum for making the show possible. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Factually.
That was a HeadGum podcast.